Now, about 12 years ago, we started out to build a community of innovation hubs across Africa. We started out with 5 members across 4 African countries. And the goal was to build a community around these innovation spaces that serve as a meeting point for young people to come in with their great ideas and turn those ideas into viable businesses that would create jobs and lead to economic development. But the thing about it is that it wasn't just about the creation of jobs and the money to be made. It was also about leveraging on innovation to solve Africa's most pressing challenges. Challenges around education, around healthcare, around food security, and financial inclusion. We had young people back then, this was over a decade ago, and of course, before then, who had these great ideas to solve these challenges in their communities. Now, these spaces across Africa, then quite few, there weren't up to 10 on the continent, served as a place of hope. Why? Because as a young person, if you have an idea and you want to build it out, and you don't have the economic backing of rich parents, or you don't have access to education, or you don't have the exposure or investors, which usually starts from friends and family, there is no hope. As a young person, if you see your mother die while giving birth to your younger brother, and you know that you could actually have solved that problem by providing access to doctors in a nearby village because there aren't any, using a medical platform or telemedicine, you know you can build it, but there's no infrastructure. There's no access to internet facilities. There's no access to capital to build your idea. There's no access to the business knowledge or tech savviness that you need. Coding classes, what's that? Those are the sorts of things you read on, see on TV. But these innovation spaces set up to provide hope for young people all over the continent. So we set out to say, you know what, there are a few innovation hubs. Let's come together and let's form a community. Let's share knowledge and let's support each other in the work that we do to support these innovators. Then we began to see the challenges. Of course, we started out with the idea that all we needed to do was just set up the office spaces, the co-creation spaces, give them business mentorship, access to finance, and the likes. But then we also saw that there were certain infrastructural challenges that we faced. Things around internet connectivity, for example, or the lack of broadband connectivity. Issues around power. It is incredibly difficult to power an innovation hub. All your money, which in most cases you start out with your personal finances or grants from a development agency, goes into just fuel for a generator. Otherwise, how would you power the innovation hub to allow the young people build? Another challenge we faced was policy. That's a tough one. The regulatory environment has been incredibly difficult to build a business, more so to build a tech-enabled business. And I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, a tech startup from Senegal developed a platform to bring together women in different communities to crowdsource or pull together their funding, right, into a savings platform. Now, from pulling their funds together, they began to provide microloans to these women. And then from these microloans, these women were able to use the funds to grow their businesses. And we all know the saying, empower a woman, empower a village. But then what happened is that this startup grew to support thousands of women to the point that they got recognized by an international bank. And the goal was to support this startup scale across West Africa and Northern Africa. Now, what would scaling have meant? Of course, they would have generated millions of dollars. That's fantastic. Of course, they would have, created more jobs. We all know the importance of job creation on the continent for youth. But another thing is that they would have empowered millions of women, women that have micro businesses, women that have small businesses, women that are looking for different means to generate income, to support themselves, support their families, to send their children to school, to provide health care for their children. This is what would have happened if they had the option to scale and had a broader access to market. It would have been impactful. But then what happened? They needed to get a license, right? To prove that they were a registered entity, but not just in a registered entity, but specifically in the financial technology space. They went back home, they went to the government agency, and they asked, look, we just need this document that certifies our business and shows that we are properly regulated and the likes. That license did not exist. They were moved from one location to the other. Go to that agency, go to that ministry, go speak to that person. Do you have connections? Maybe they can sort you out. Eventually, they lost the deal. They lost the ability to scale. They lost the ability to impact millions of women because they did not have the license and because the law did not recognize their type of business, which, by the way, had been operating for years, had been paying taxes, and had met all the regulatory requirements. But that particular recognition was not available. Now, other than regulatory challenges, there are challenges in terms of access to finance. As I mentioned earlier, you're a young person, you're building your business. If you don't have friends and family that, have a lot of money to give you for your seed funding, it's almost impossible to do anything. You need money to build the technology, you need money to hire, you need money to run operations, you need money for marketing. Because you can build a fantastic product, but if it's just sitting down there on the shelf and you don't have money to promote your products or even move from one location to the other, then nobody's going to use it. You're not going to generate any revenue. You're not going to impact the lives you want to. Now, another is access to data. Now, I'm just giving a few examples, by the way, in terms of the challenges we faced along the way in supporting these innovations as innovation hubs. In terms of access to data, you need data to build. If you have a health tech, for example, you want to build a health technology, you don't have the right data in terms of the problem you're trying to solve, then how do you build? How do you even know that there's a market out there for it? But all hope is not lost. We found a solution to solve this myriad of problems. And one particular point I'd like to make today is the power of collaboration. Because when we talk about policies, for example, we all know the importance of the role of government. So one of the things we set out to do years ago was, as a community, actually drive advocacy of enabling policies. We came together, we co-created, we held dialogues with the government. And I would say it, it's tough, you know. But the thing about it is that when you bring yourself and ensure you have a seat at the table as well with the government, when you come together and say, these are the challenges, which in some cases they aren't aware of because they simply do not understand. But when you come together and say, let's explain it, these are the challenges, but also what are your concerns? Because there are concerns, right? Technology has come to disrupt industries. Technology has revolutionized industries and sectors, and that's fantastic. On the other hand, there are issues around data security, around consumer protection, around control. We talk about AI and dangers of AI. How would the government manage that and protect their citizens? So sometimes the immediate response is just regulate, ban, that's it, or just not even look in that direction. But what we've done over the years is come together and say, let's build a sort of enabling policies for innovation, entrepreneurship, and technology startups to thrive. And over the past 5 years, we've seen the adoption of startup acts, for example. At the moment, there are 4 startup acts across the continent. All laws, including Nigeria, which was passed last year, all laws put together to actually recognize startups as a special type of entity, highly scalable businesses driven by technology, and then set the sort of infrastructure and regulatory environment and policies for these startups to thrive, to create millions of jobs needed, to contribute to the economic and social well-being of the communities of the nation, of the continent, and of course, the ability to impact lives. Another stakeholder group we've worked with in terms of collaboration is the investors. There's no money? Okay. How do we raise an army of angel investors who would pump the minimum amount into funding businesses? The concept of angel investing was relatively new a couple of decades ago, but we're quite happy to see that we have angel networks set up across the continent. Over 30 African countries now have angel networks set up, some in multiple cities in the country. And angel investing alone contributes over $100 million every year to funding startups. Now, this is beside development finance. So we have the development finance institutions that have now come into the African continent to see our African startups as an asset class to invest in, either through equity-free funding, grants, debt financing, or equity. Because just like the startups in Silicon Valleys have become unicorns and have scaled globally, our African startups and our young innovators also have the potential to do so. When we talk about the issues around education, over 30 million children below the secondary school level are out of school. Our innovators can solve that problem, and they are solving that problem. But to support these innovators, we need to come together. The financiers need to come together, the development organizations, the infrastructure providers, the government and the policymakers, the universities and the research institutions need to come together to bring the research, to bring the data, to support in the process of research innovation and even commercialization of data. Over 600 million people on the African continent do not have access to quality healthcare. And yet, we have startups and innovators that have built solutions to solve this challenge. Now, here's the thing. If we're going to talk about solving the African problem, we also need to address the issue of the difficulties to move between borders. Of course, we're quite excited about the fact that the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement was passed a few years ago. And this is with the purpose of allowing easy movement of people, of goods, services, and capital across border. But we need to work together to ensure that the innovators and the startups are well represented in the implementation of the CFTA agreement. Because movement of goods and services and capital, again, is not just about businesses being successful. It's not just a capitalist dream. It's also a matter of survival. It's also a matter of ensuring that we have more people have access to the sorts of financial services across border. It's also about ensuring that our farmers, who, by the way, despite the fact that farming and Africa has the largest, arable land in the world, we still suffer from undernutrition. Almost 20% of the African population. But we have the solutions. So how do we ensure that these solutions scale easily from one location to the other? We need to come together. We need to collaborate. We need to work together. I mean, I'm quite happy to say that since we started out this journey 12 years ago, with just 5 members across 4 African countries, we've grown to over 400 members across 52 African countries and over 200 African cities. With a thank you. With a wider network of over 1 million entrepreneurs, innovators, developers, creatives, and partners of different stakeholder groups, all working together to ensure that we build Africa's prosperity through innovation. So, again, I would say work together. There's this general perception that says people don't like to collaborate. People do collaborate, and collaboration is powerful because when you do things alone, the effect is there, fantastic, well done. But when you work together, there's an exponential effect, it happens. And we can't afford to do things in a linear manner. We have to work together as a multi stakeholder group, as individuals, as innovators, as change makers, as disruptors, as enablers. And we can do this. So I challenge you too. Let's work together to build from the bottom up. Thank you.